everyone, and welcome to Discovery Speaker Series. My name is Clarissa Felling, and I am the Program and Volunteer Coordinator for the Puget Sound Estuarium. We host these opportunities for artists, educators, scientists, and Earth advocates to share about their current work, research, or organization to spark conversations in our community. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the Q&A below. Don't forget you can download a free coloring page to go along with today's talk. If you have to leave early or know someone who would be interested in listening to this talk, it will be on our YouTube channel here shortly. Tonight, I am thrilled to welcome Carrie Ziegler. She is an international artist, speaker, and expert in collaborative art. She will take us on a journey into the transformative power of art and its crucial role in sparking personal and societal change. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today, and feel free to get started whenever you are ready.
What I love to do is to work with hundreds, sometimes thousands of individuals to create these multifaceted, large-scale collaborative art and action projects around different environmental and social justice issues with the goal of inspiring change. And when I think about art and I think about action, I think about how when I marry the two together, they become incredibly powerful. When people make art around the same thing and they add on to each other's ideas, it becomes this story that unfolds, creating kind of almost like a cascading event that can even lead to systemic changes. You know, we as artists and educators, we have this power, this creative power to transform not only our own existence and that of our communities, but to create a ripple of change with an impact that continues to reach farther and farther out. As an artist, an educator, I have had the honor of facilitating not one, but two projects that have actually helped to create changes in our local government. And this is just, incredibly, incredibly humbling for me to be able to say that, because obviously it wasn't just me. It's all about the relationships and the community and the connections that we make and what we can do together when we work on something together. But to continue to, really show up for this work, I have to be able to continue to grow myself, right? So I'm constantly trying to figure out, like, how do I do this better? How do I make sure that I'm not excluding people? How do I make sure that, like, when I'm doing this work, when I'm like, that I'm making sure that there is space for other people to rise up and share what they need to share as well. So needless to say, the climate crisis is huge. Like, it's daunting. It's just something that is just so hard to wrap our minds around. And there is so much important work being done on so many different fronts. So for me, a lot of that looks like doing work in the arts and doing community engagement. But you don't need to be an artist. You don't need to be a scientist or even an expert in anything, but maybe your own life, to be able to take part in creating a better way to live in this world. And, there's just so many ways to be involved in creating these solutions, whether that's through raising a child. I have a 7-year-old, and I feel like that is some of the most important work I get to do, is to be able to be a parent to her. Maybe you're growing a garden. I think about how Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, talked about how revolutionary it can be to be growing your own food, right? Maybe you're getting involved in local climate action, or maybe you're just really focusing on being kind, because we need so much more kindness in this world, right? And I found, it is so easy, even though we live in this world where it's so easy to connect with people, it's also so easy to feel alone. And when I think about the work of climate crisis, I think about what high school students who are climate activists have said to me. They're like, we don't do this because we want praise for it. We don't want anything, but we do this and we come together because we are scared. And when we work together on this, we feel okay. And so when we are able to meet with other people who can share some of our cares and concerns and try to create a better situation, it really can, I think, help us to feel like we're doing something. And so, as an artist, and I'm mostly a one-woman show a lot of the time, and so it can be really easy for me myself to become isolated and to think that like I need to be doing more. And so that's why I love collaboration and collaborative art particularly so much. It helps me to engage with so many other people who care about the planet and care about each other, that we can grieve the losses together and explore solutions and also have a good time, right? Because what good is a revolution if we can't dance while we're having it? So my background is as a naturalist and an environmental educator. I also have a background in carpentry. My dad built houses, so I got to learn how to use lots of tools, which has been so helpful in my career as an artist. But, I spent a long time trying to figure out how to bring the arts and the sciences together. And I didn't really know how to do that. I didn't have a model for this. I tried over the years many different things and they were great, but it wasn't until I was working for Thurston County, 10 plus years ago. And I'm just going to share my screen here. And I got to do this project called the Plastic Whale Project. Now, I'm sure some of you remember this project. This was my very first large scale big project that I did. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this project. I just want you to know that this kind of set the stage for a lot of the work that I've done since then. It involved over 900 people. It had so many different layers and aspects and organizations involved in it. And it was really important for the passing of the plastic bag ordinance that happened back in 2012. And so I learned so much from this project. So some of the things I learned was that I learned how art can break down barriers, how it opens hearts. I learned how it allows people to see something, if only for a moment maybe, but something that they've never seen before. And it can help people to understand the power of making something so much bigger than any one of us can do on our own. And that, I think, is so important when we're talking about these huge issues like climate change, because climate change is too big. It's too big for any one person, any one entity. It's way too big. And so when we really need that lived experience of being a part of something that is bigger than us, right? So that we can figure out what that's like to actually make a difference in that way. One of the other things I really I do a lot of work around the climate, and a big part of that is because it intersects with so many other issues, right? I mean, we are I could name almost any issue and be like, well, that relates to climate change in this way. And so when I've done a lot of these different projects, sometimes I don't even talk about climate change. I mean, I'm thinking about, for instance, the plankton mural. If I'm going to pull that up here at the estuarium. When we did this mural, what we were really working on with this mural was this idea around how our oceans are being impacted by the climate. And so we focused on ocean acidification. And this project was so fun because I got to do all this great research and met with some different professors out at Evergreen. I got to look through microscopes and see all these different diagrams of plankton, and then turn them into these giant, bigger than life experiences of what a plankton, whether it's a zooplankton or a phytoplankton, might look like up close. Of course, in almost all my work, community is a huge part of that. And that was very much the case with this mural. But one of the things that, many people might not notice on this mural is there's actually a life cycle of an oyster. Oysters and other shellfish are such a huge part of our local economy, particularly for local tribes, but in general, they're a very important part of our economy. And when the oceans and the waters are too acidic, it actually harms the oysters and the clams in their larval stage. And so this particular life cycle shows this is a healthy larval oyster, and then one that has been in acidic water might look like this. And so the idea behind that mural was that the estuarium could use it as a teaching tool to talk about these different plankton, and some of which are going to have a really hard time with ocean acidification, and others are going to really boom, right? And so being able to have these big pictures to help us see something that we can't see with our own eyes, which was really fun. Another project that took a little bit of an indirect look at climate change was a project I did a number of years ago, which was a collaboration with the Thurston County Food Bank. We did this project called Less Waste, More Food, Art in Action. And I worked with, so one of the things that I love very much is when I can actually involve the people who are most impacted, the stakeholders, in the design of the different art pieces. And so this was a project that was going to result in a permanent exterior installation at the Thurston County Food Bank. I'm just going to go ahead so I can show you the end result here. And so I created this project with the food bank that talked all about our resources and how wasting food impacts our environment, but also like it's this strange dichotomy where we waste food. Like Americans, consumers, waste 25% of the food they buy. At the overall, when you look at the whole scale of from the farm to the trash can or compost bin, 40% of the food in the United States is wasted. And at the same time, we have so many people who are hungry and don't have enough food. So it's this very strange dichotomy. So we looked at that, looking at like the resources that are wasted at the same time as people are going hungry. And I worked with about 100 middle and high school students in the North Thurston School District to come up with designs for this project. This is the design that we ended up coming up with, which featured this kind of gnarly apple tree that had hands coming out of it, and then had an apple holding this apple with this embossed, with an embossment of the earth in it. So this idea that this multi-generational idea talking about like we are we are holding our planet and our food in our hands. We are a part of this system. And so once that was all designed, I worked with over 1,000 more students who all created stencils, which were about food waste and solutions to food waste and hunger. And they all made these stencils, which were then put in the walkway of the Thurston County Food Bank, which were so beautiful. Like they just, when you walk along that walkway, it's just this whole story of like solutions to people being hungry and like this resource loss, and it's really incredible. And what was one of the things that like I worked, it was mostly high school and middle school students in North Thurston, and it was so great to talk to them about the solutions to this problem, right? And because they had so many different ideas. And I can remember one person, like this one student, I think she was a high school student, really getting excited about this. And after the presentation and being part of the workshops, she went and started a food sharing table at her school. And so people can actually take, what they learn and then add on to it and create something in their own space that helps to bring solutions to some of the problems that they're learning about. I think that like one of the things I love about art is, and doing this type of work, is that like when people learn about something really hard, like how thousands of marine mammals die when they ingest plastics, for instance, or how many people are going hungry in our own country, right? Like they learn these hard things, but then they make art around them. There's this capacity that happens like when they're making the art that allows our brains to process through this information and move from a place of stagnation into a place of action. Like they are immediately taking action, and it helps to create a space where like they're not going to get stuck in that depression and that apathy that is so rampant in our society today, because they have a way to take action. And then they also they have this whole story of the bigger creation that they're a part of that they can then use to tell other people about what they've learned and what they might want to do about it. So it's really what we're doing when we're creating these big projects and involving so many different people in so many different ways, is we're creating stories. And stories are so important when we're talking about creating change. Like, that is where we connect, right? So these projects that I was just sharing, they took this sort of indirect look at climate change. And sometimes that's exactly what we need to do. And in other times, sometimes we need to hit it head on. But when I think about climate change, and like, when I think about the whole thing, I think about, like, the word that comes to mind is transformation. And I have to think about societal transformation, because the way that we are living right now is not sustainable. And so if we want to actually make a difference and make a change, we need to change our society. But before we can do that, we need to, most of us anyways, we need to make some changes ourselves. And I really believe that, like, to make change happen at a community-wide or a worldwide level, like, that needs to be preceded, entwined with hundreds, thousands, millions of people undergoing their own personal transformations. And that all starts with you. And, you know, growing up, like, I didn't even know it was possible to be an artist. Like, that was the farthest thing from what I thought was possible. I was the first person in my family to go to a 4-year college. And so, like, it was a big thing for me to be like, oh, I have a choice. I could go to college or I could go into the military. That was more choice than my parents had, right? But I had that choice, but I had no idea I could be an artist. And so I went from this child who didn't know it was possible to be an artist, or at least not for somebody like me who grew up in a blue collar, you know, great place, but not like, no, I didn't know any artists. But now I get to be an artist who speaks and works internationally, you know, like, that I have gotten to facilitate not one, but 2 projects that were integral to changing our governments. Like, I think, like, I know that it's possible to make big sweeping changes just because I can see it in myself and I see it in other people all the time. I mean, the fact that I get to be an artist still blows my mind to this day. I'm just like, what? Is that even possible? I'm just so grateful for that. But the thing is that, you know, we obviously don't get to choose when anybody else is transformed. We don't get to choose what other people decide to believe. Like, that is not up to us. But we can offer them something that might open their eyes or maybe their hearts to a different possibility. And that is where, for me, the power of collaborative art lies. It gives us this means to open hearts, to break down barriers. I mean, are you with me? Does this resonate with you? You know, early 2020, I began working for the Thurston Climate Action Team, which TCAT for short. Yes, Christine. And and I said earlier how, like, I'm kind of a one-woman show a lot of the times. And so I really wanted to get more involved in local climate work. So I took a part-time position as a community, to do community engagement. And I was specifically not hired as an artist. Like, we talked about it in my interview, like, so we know you're an artist, but, like, that's not this job. I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. That's not a big deal. So it just so happened that I started working about exactly, I should say, 1 week before we all went into lockdown for the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, of course, like so many of us in the world, we had to completely rethink our work. Excuse me. And so the first thing we decided we would do is we would offer a series of online workshops. Like, that made sense for what we were doing, trying to engage the public in these different climate action things. And so I kind of hesitantly offered to do a workshop on the power of art. And they were like, yeah, sure, why not? So I started thinking about it and planning the workshop. And as so often happens to me, this one workshop just started growing and blossoming. And before I knew it, I had the outline in my head, in my heart maybe, of this multifaceted virtual art and action project all around climate change. And I was like, oh, but I wasn't hired to do this. But I knew that it was also probably our best opportunity to really engage with our people and to make some change happen. And so this was also at this time, Thurston County and all the local jurisdictions here were undergoing a process to write a climate mitigation plan. And TCAT was really involved in that, like trying to make sure that the plan was as strong as it possibly could be. And so I presented my idea for this big project, this big campaign to the staff and convinced them that this was a great idea, and really ended up wrapping this project, this all around the trying to create a strong Thurston climate mitigation plan and getting that passed and implemented. So that was like really cool. And so that's exactly what I did. Now, the plan wasn't completed at the time, but it ended up being a very strong plan. Like, so the goal, the like end goal is, if there is such a thing, is that by 2030, we would be 85% below 2015 levels of greenhouse gases. So very ambitious, right? And also for some of our constituents and some of our more conservative districts, kind of not going to be good for getting reelected. So it was going to be a tough sell. So this project that ended up being called the Chrysalis Project, Transforming Together, was, for starters, co-designed with a number of educators in our community and also with a number of youth climate activists that I invited to help me to make sure that like this is what we needed at that time. I no longer like to plan these things in a vacuum because like I may have good ideas, but I know that when I get a group of people together, like we are going to have something way better than anything I can come up with on my own. So I did just that, and it was fantastic what came out of that. I ended up holding workshops online with over 200 youth and adults. And in these workshops, we really explored the power of art to create change. And we examined that critical moment that we were in with the triple crises of the pandemic, a racial reckoning, and the climate crisis. We use the metaphor of what happens inside of a chrysalis as a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly to help us understand what we were going through. I mean, both ourselves as individuals and as a society. And so together we created these visions of what we wanted to be when we emerged from our individual and societal chrysalides. As part of the workshops, participants painted pictures, they wrote poems, they collaged, they used whatever was in their house to create their own visions of futures where we would not only survive, but thrive. And after they'd made their artwork, they turned it over and they wrote letters to our local elected officials. And in these letters, they talked about where they were at and how they were feeling. Like these were the early days of the pandemic. We were in lockdown, like we were all uncertain, right? They talked about what they were already doing for climate action, and then they made more commitments for what they were going to do moving forward. And then in those letters, they asked, and in some cases they demanded, that local elected officials take strong climate action, that they pass and implement the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. They then took their letters with their artwork, folded them up, put them in the mail, and mailed them directly to their local elected officials in all 4 of our jurisdictions. You know, these were powerful calls to action, and they impacted the elected officials very strongly. I could tell you a number of stories about that, but the one that I always like to tell is about the county commissioner meeting where the commissioners were having their meeting and going to decide whether or not to pass and implement the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. So one of our commissioners, Ty Mensner, when it was his turn to give testimony, he stood up and he pulled a letter out of his pocket. He said that he had been carrying this letter around for months as his guiding light. He then read this letter, and this is the letter that you're seeing on your screen right now, written by a high school climate activist. He read this letter as his testimony for why they should pass and implement the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. That night, not only did they pass the plan, they also declared a climate emergency for Thurston County. And in part due to this project, all 4 of our local jurisdictions did pass the climate mitigation plan, and 3 of the 4 declared a climate emergency. You know, this project, it required immense vulnerability from myself and from everybody involved. You know, we were in such a unique time in history, and there were a lot of emotions. And to even think, like, it feels daring to say out loud that, yes, we can have a different future. You know, like that is, it's like a risk. I don't know why that is, but to believe that feels so daring. And they were doing that, right? And they were doing it in writing and sending it to their elected leaders. It was really incredible. And I think that, you know, when doing this work or any work, creating that space for that vulnerability, it is essential to creating a world where we all can thrive. You know, I mean, when we take that risk and we show our vulnerability, we use our creativity, what we do is we reach people on an emotional level. And that is where change happens. So when you look at this project and you look at your own work, you know, whether it's your personal inner work or your work in communities, you know, where you're trying to create change, maybe you're just trying to like let the most authentic you out that you can. Like, what do you think of? You know, what comes up for you? What could you do differently to connect with people's hearts? What breaks open your own heart? Because that is where the magic lies. Think more before doing. The power of the pause, right? Like there is serious power in that. Thank you, Christine. Yeah, anybody else want to offer anything? Well, if you do, we'll be around. So the Chrysalis Project focused on these grand visions for creating this future where we can all thrive. In the follow-up to that project, the Climate Justice Mural Project, we focused in on the more tangible steps needed to get us to that future. So I was still working with TCAT, the Thurston Climate Action Team, and I wrote a grant. And in this grant, I included stipends to include 5 other artists on the design team. And this is a way for me to use my privilege as, you know, a white person, a person with a college degree, a person that has a platform to share my knowledge and my platform with younger people and people maybe from underrepresented groups. And it felt like I didn't feel like I could design a mural all about climate justice without including diverse voices, right? It would be hollow. It wouldn't work. And so I was really excited to be able to have these 5 other artists working with me. And they are all absolutely incredible. There's a picture of the design team here. So our goal for this mural was to design a mural that was solution-oriented, that would draw people in, that would ask hard questions, and leave the viewer wanting more, wanting to be part of that solution. You know, it was an opportunity to bring forth imagery and words that could impact people on an emotional level. So we held a public workshop for the design of this mural, and it ended up landing on the hottest weekend on record in our area during the heat dome of 2021. And it was a perfect example of like how climate injustice expresses itself, because there were a number of people who were elderly, particularly, who decided they could not join us because they didn't feel safe. It wasn't like healthy for them to be there. So it was the timing around this was really ripe for great conversation. But even without their their input in that particular workshop. We had an amazing workshop. Candace Penn here, she's the climate ecologist and tribal member of the Squaxin Island tribe. She opened the workshop with a tribal blessing and song. We explored climate justice, which acknowledges that climate change can and does have different social, economic, public health, and other impacts on underprivileged populations. And each artist shared their own perspectives on what climate justice was. And we had this rich whole group conversation. The artists then led different groups in through a design process that was just, really wonderful. We came up with so many great images and words, and it was really, really incredible. After the workshop, I met with the artists from the design team twice. We had 2 meetings, and we took all this imagery and everything that we talked about. And oh my gosh, the synchronicity of this meeting of people was so incredible. Like the design just flowed. It was incredible. We painted the mural then on one of the busiest streets in Olympia. I'm sure most of you, if you're in Olympia, know this mural, right? It's on the way down in Uptown on the west side. 26,000 plus cars drive by every day. We had just so much fun painting with the community, and then finishing it over the next month after the community painting days. So I'm going to kind of quickly lead us through a little bit about the design and what that really represented to the design team and what had come out of those workshops. So if you start on the left-hand side of the mural closest to downtown, the mural begins with this strong brown fist. And that fist actually belongs to Imani Mabwa Childress, who is on our design team. And that fist is holding this braided ribbon. And each of the ribbons represents a different aspect of diversity. So we have one of the ribbons represents the colors from the gay pride flag, one from the trans flag, and then the other ribbon represents different skin tones, right? So it's really talking about how we need the leadership of Black and Brown people, but that we all need to work together in order to create a better world with when it comes to climate justice. Well, really any better world, I should say. The ribbons and the braid then transitions into this area that talks about green building and alternative transportation, renewable energy. And then there's this section with these beautiful roots from an old red cedar tree that has some different elements that represent from local tribes. So I worked with Candace Penn to make sure these elements fit, and that she helped us to kind of see what would work and wouldn't work. And she also offered this blessing, which is in Lachute seed here, and in English, penned by design team member George Galvez. And she worked, I should say, with Jeremiah George, who's a linguist from the tribe, to do that translation, which roughly translates to, I am thankful for this day. I am thankful for this life. I am thankful for my life. I am thankful for all things. Fix my mind, heart, fix my body, fix my life, soul, make us one, and all will be right in this life. So be it. These roots then move into the word climate, which transitions into water for justice, even has some salmon amidst the water and the whale's tail, and then transitions into this section that is about food justice with all sorts of native flowers and flowers from medicinal and edible plants. And that was led by artist D. Light, that section of the mural. Just such a gorgeous, those colors pop so much. I love it. And as you continue on to the right, you have the dandelion leaves floating off into this kaleidoscope of monarch butterflies, which eventually at the end of the mural, there's one butterfly that lands on the child's outstretched hand. And so the idea behind this is that everything we are creating right now, the good, the bad, all of it, like it is our gift to future generations. And we got to do it with love. Jennifer Johnson, writer and environmental educator, wrote a land acknowledgement specifically for this mural. And it says, let's see, it says, one second here. Can't quite read that. I would read it to you if I could, but I've lost my note. Oh, here we go. It says this: our future's children deserve hope transformed into action. May our ancestors witness our ability to create change, rippling forward and reaching back. We are the center, the now, the change. We acknowledge our responsibility to this land of the Coast Salish people. We stand in solidarity with all tribes, without whom there's nothing. This mural over the last few years, I've had so many people come up to me and talk about how they feel about it and how it impacts them. And every once in a while, somebody would be like, oh yeah, we drive by that. And my kids, like, I painted that butterfly, and they feel like they completely own the mural. And I'm like, yes, that is exactly what we want. We want people to feel ownership over this because they own it. This is, something that we are creating all together. Excuse me. So, when we talk about the climate crisis, here is the real problem. We're essentially asking people to transform their entire way of relating to the earth. And we haven't given them a vision for a future that is more attractive than the one they currently have. We are asking a lot of people, and the dominant narrative is not helping. It is our job to turn that dominant narrative from one of scarcity to abundance, from have to get to. Like, we get to do this work, people. We get to be part of creating a new reality. Like, how cool is that? And it is our job to help people see a vision for a future where we can not only survive, but thrive. Art and creativity can do just that. Whether you are an artist or a scientist, a parent or a teacher, maybe you work in tech, I don't know, but whatever you do, like, we need you to be part of this solution. We need your particular genius. Individual change is important. And I think that, like, it's necessary in order to get to the next phase. But what we really need to work towards is systemic changes. So I'd like to ask each of you to think about where you have power and influence. Whether is that in your office, in your school, maybe within your neighborhood or organization, maybe it's your family. About how can you use whatever your position in this world is to tip the scales just a little bit more? Because together we do have so much power. We are in the midst of a crisis. We are in the midst of multiple crises. And the role of a crisis is to signal to the organism that incremental change is no longer enough. We need big actions based in creativity, in connection, and courage. I've worked with thousands of people making art about different environmental and social justice issues. I work with artists in my mentorship program, with governments and organizations to help them reach their goals or to completely rethink how they're doing their work. Feel free to check out my website if you want to learn more. And if you're inspired, please share my work with other people. That is always so helpful to artists and people working in this type of industry. But I'm doing all of this while continuing to do my own inner work, trying to stay grounded, stay open, trying to be right size, And I just think we just need to all be standing up with as much love and joy and compassion as we possibly can. I mean, there are obviously hard things. There are horrific things happening in this world. And that is one of the reasons why I love to sink into the butterflies story so much. I think we have about 15 minutes left. Do you mind if I take like 5 more minutes to finish this up? I'd like to just sink into a chrysalis together for a moment, all right? So if you can, just take a moment to sit or stand somewhere you can really just tune into your own breathing. Maybe close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. And just listen and allow whatever arises to arise. Before entering a chrysalis, a caterpillar enters into a feeding frenzy of overconsumption. And I have to ask myself, does it overeat intentionally or with blind instinct? Does it trust the process or does it feel like it's dying? Inside of the chrysalis, the caterpillar's tissues melt into a virtually undifferentiated goo, a type of nutrient soup. What remain are what scientists call imaginal cells. And these cells link together and become the template from which that goo reorganizes itself into a butterfly. Now, at first, these imaginal cells, these seeds of future potential, which contain the blueprint of a flying creature, at first they operate independently as single-celled organisms. And they are regarded as threats and are attacked by the caterpillar's immune system. But they persist, they multiply, and they connect with one another. These imaginal cells, they form clusters and clumps. They begin resonating at the same frequency and passing information back and forth until they reach a tipping point. They begin then to act not as discrete individual cells, but as a multi-celled organism, and a butterfly is born. We are in the chrysalis of humanity right now. We are in the nutrient soup. We are the imaginal cells. We, the mothers, the fathers, the children, the educators, the artists, the leaders, like we, the change makers, we are the ones shining the light for others to see. You know, the pandemic, the racial reckoning, the poverty, natural disasters, war, they are all glimpses of what is to come with climate change. From this space where maybe we're afraid to really look at what's happening, or maybe we're afraid to just step into our fullest potential and be seen. From this place, knowing that the impacts of climate change will be huge and huger still, from this place, how can you step more fully into creating a future where we all thrive? You know, in many ways, our current reality is catastrophic, and yet it opens a new path. What if we could transform our relationship to climate change? What if we each stepped fully into our own selves? What if we used art, creativity, and collaboration to help others see a possibility of a future where we all can thrive? Would we create resilient communities of hopeful people taking action to create a better world? You know, like a caterpillar inside of a chrysalis, we all have to overcome our own resistance, you know, the resistance of our cultures to undergo whatever we need to take our next step and see where that leads us. My vision is to see these types of projects and campaigns happening in every city and every town across the world. You know, I envision a cascading effect as more and more people say yes to their callings, to sharing their gifts and galvanizing collectives of humans who are standing up for the earth, for the ocean, for the people who are most impacted and least responsible. It is time to shift the scales. And to do that, we need you to say yes. You know, the future is not yet written. And I believe that not only can we create a different world, but that it is our responsibility to make it so. When we step into the fullness of who we are, how we move through the world becomes a call to action. And when we face our fears and these huge societal problems with creativity, connection, and courage, not only will we succeed, but we will rocket our communities out of apathy and into action. thank you for listening and being here with me. I can't wait to hear if you have any questions or thoughts. And if you are interested in working on a project or initiative with me, or just learning more about my coaching or mentorship program, let's hop on a call. I'll go ahead and put a link into the chat if you want to sign up for a little one-on-one session with me. And otherwise, I'll turn it over to Clarissa.
Thanks, Carrie. That was amazing to see all the different projects that you've done and getting to see on the back end and all the collaborators with it, because that's the really cool part, that everyone gets their own little piece of it. If anyone has any questions for Carrie, feel free to type them into the Q&A at the bottom. I'll have one to get us started. What sort of challenges do you face when painting murals?
Challenges to face when painting murals. I think when I was painting the first mural at the estuarium on the east side of the building there, it was really hot and I was pregnant. And I remember I'm usually no problem hauling scaffolding all over, and a friend of mine who was painting with me was also pregnant, and we were both like, okay, we're doing this thing. But a lot of times the heat is one of the things that it can be really challenging. But another is that when I get started, it's really hard to stop. And so I can really wear myself out. I had this amazing opportunity this summer to paint a mural in Vancouver, Washington with Sarah Folden, who's a cowlitz artist. It was her mural, and she invited a team of young cowlitz artists to help her. And she invited me to come along because of my experience in painting. And she was so great. She was like, we're going to work for like 6 or 7 hours a day, and then we're going to take breaks and da da da. And I was like, wow, this is good. So I think learning to really pace myself and slow down is a challenge sometimes. Yeah.
Nice. We have a question from Bob. How do you get into the zone for both artistic and climate advocacy activities to do your best work?
How do I get into the zone to do my best work? I think that, I have a daily meditation practice, for one thing, and that feels really important to being able to show up, is having that practice that allows me to calm my brain and let go of things. When I'm doing collaborative work, to really be able to show up for that, I need to put my ideas aside. Because I've got all kinds of great ideas too, but when I'm working, when I was working on the Less Waste, More Food project, more food, less whatever, with the food bank, and I was working on this design team, I really felt like I almost physically set it aside because I didn't want to influence what they were coming up with. Obviously I give examples and things, but I think so really being able to show up fully has a lot to do with taking care of myself and practicing meditation and letting go. And then I guess I'm not sure if that answers fully your question, but that's probably the most important thing. I mean, before I came on tonight, I took a few minutes just to breathe and clear my brain so that I could be fully present, which I think is really the most important with all of this, is showing up with our full, as much presence as we can.
It can be hard to leave everything behind and be fully present, but when you do, it's such a more enriching experience.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Another question that we have has to do with how can we do good for all, even though it seems that with the increase in population, especially on our natural resources and worsening climate change, how can we go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big questions, right? How do we do that? I think one of the things that I come up with is, and it's the kind of what I was talking about, like it's really rethinking this whole how we relate to the earth and how we live on the earth. Like I think the media wants to scare people into thinking like, well, you can't have coffee and you can't have meat and you have to live like I don't know what, like in all this whole scarcity mode. But I think maybe it's more about shifting our values to like, what is really, when we get down to it, what is really important? Is it like flying all over the place in the world, or is it having real community, right? And real people that we love? And I'm not saying it has to be one or the other even, but I think it has a lot, for me, it has a lot to do with like just reshaping the narrative of what it means to be human and what's important, and like really getting down to the basics feels so important. And obviously, like for all, like I can't, like I think what the best that I feel like we can do is like an opportunity for us all to thrive, because bad things are still going to happen. Like that's part of this world that we live in. Like, I mean, if you look at nature, it's like not everybody makes it, right? but living in a way that maybe more listens to and watches how nature does this, right? Like when a ecosystem is in harmony, what does that look like? I think of an old growth forest and the diversity that is there, and like how there's space and sharing of resources, etc.
Yeah, that was a very, very tough question to answer.
That pulled a good one out on me there. We'll have to have a longer conversation about that.
We got one from Christine. What does it look like to succeed when change is hard and slow?
Do you mean like on a personal level, Christine, or on a more community-wide level? Existentialist leanings. That's awesome, Robert. On a climate level, okay. What does it mean to succeed when change is hard and slow? I think that, you know, for me, it's celebrating all of the small stuff as it comes along. Like when we've passed the climate mitigation plan, that was huge, right? Like, I mean, when the young folks had a protest and a die-in at City Hall, like that was huge. Like, I mean, these small things that we do are really important. And then realizing too that we don't know everything. Like we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I mean, we can't possibly, like, I'm definitely listening to the scientists, and like I hear all of that and I'm completely with them, and still remembering that like we don't know, like I don't know what my change, what my, if I make a choice today, I don't know what impact that is going to have on the world, but I have to believe that when I make a choice to try to make the world a little bit of a better place, or even just to be nice to somebody, that has the capacity to do something much farther out than that. And if I believe that, then what I've found is that I can create bigger and bigger successes along the way. And also, I just feel like a better human, right? Like when I actually can believe that. And I know that's hard. And that is part of like a lifelong, you know, a very long practice of meditation and other things that allow me to be able to be in a place where most of the time I really do believe that we are making this change happen right now.
Very inspiring.
Something about grants.
So yeah, do you write your own project grants, and are you very successful at it, or do people have to keep applying if they don't get one?
Okay, so here's a couple of things about being an artist. One is no is a very, very common answer. Like rejection is part of the game. Like, I mean, I've been rejected so many times.
Your volume is a little iffy at the moment.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh, it says my connection is unstable. I don't know what to do about that. Maybe I'll stop my video. Can you hear me any better now?
Yeah.
Did it help?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so grants. So as an artist, I would say that like maybe 40% of my time is making art, and the rest of it is spent on things like promotion and like all the other business things that are out there. And grants and artist calls, excuse me, I would say I've been most successful on local things. Like when I've gone for bigger like national and international things, there's so much competition that I have had less success with that. And most of the best successes that I've had have been when I've collaborated with other organizations to do so. But I'm writing grants right now. So yes, it is something that I do.
Well,
Oh,
best
thanks,
of luck
Elise.
with your current one.
Thank you very much. Yes. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I'm sorry, my internet got a little unstable there for a sec. I can't show you myself at the moment, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I hope to continue to connect with some of you in the future. The estuarium, of course, I always love working with. And yeah, so any other final thoughts?
Anyone have any final questions? If not, yeah, thank you, Carrie, so much for taking time out of your night to present for us. That was truly inspirational, and I'm excited to try and implement more art into our volunteer program to get people inspired.
Yay.
Thank you, everyone, for attending and listening in tonight. I hope you got to do your coloring pages.
Ooh, nice.
And if you did, send us a photo of them. If you want to get info about our next Discovery Speaker Series, you can either follow us on social media, or you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. It'll be at the bottom of our website. You can sign up for that, and we'll send out the newsletter each month with upcoming events like this one. Can't end this without saying that Give Local if you are local in the community. Give Local is happening starting the 6th of November, but you can give early, and it will be a whole slew of nonprofits from the area, and you can donate. And if you do during Give Local, then all of these organizations have the opportunity to get matching funds from the South Sound Community Foundation. So look for Give Local and all of the nonprofits that you care about in this area. Again, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks for coming.